very good afternoon, and thanks for clicking on to the Remembrance Day edition of Vogan's European Outlook for Sunday, the 13th of November. And we are seeing a significant increase in snow cover across not just the northern portion of Eurasia, but also across North America as well. We do have significant cold drilling into the central and eventually into the eastern half of the United States after some very, very warm temperatures in recent times. And you can see here the majority of Canada, with the exceptions of southern and southeastern Ontario and Quebec, is free of snow cover. We do have a little swathe here, as you can see, through the Midwest, the Ohio Valley, a large area of the western half of the United States now covered in snow, with the exceptions of the southwest. And like I say, the majority of Canada is pretty covered at this moment in time. We are, of course, seeing sea ice at fairly low levels, but it is slowly going to start to increase in coverage as we go into the month of December and on into the heart of the winter season. Northern portions of Scandinavia seeing snow now as well. Looking at the GFS snow depth chart here, this is the difference between now and what it looks like by the time we reach the end of November here. So we are starting to see an increase, according to the model anyway, through the Pyrenees, the Alps. Of course, you would expect to see that. Scandinavia becoming a little bit more snow covered as well, and more or less all of Russia will turn snow covered by the time we reach the end of this month. What is interesting is the Arctic Oscillation continues to trend towards negative as we go towards the end of the month. The North Atlantic Oscillation still generally neutral, but notice here that we do have a bit of a dip coming up this upcoming week, and the reason why is because we do have building heights to the north here as we continue to see the Atlantic trying to push its way towards the west of Europe here into the British Isles. Of course, we've got a lot of high pressure, but I think what's happening is we're seeing this push of Atlantic influence against this blocking area of high pressure, and it's forcing it northwards. And I think that is what's going to eventually try and trigger a slight negative NAO. That then forces the very, very powerful jet stream crossing the Atlantic further south. And we're going to see areas of low pressure coming in further south. What it is also going to do is we're going to see the remnants of Hurricane Nicole that impacted Florida moved up the eastern side of the United States. And what's going to happen is it's going to become a very, very deep area of low pressure over the northwest Atlantic this upcoming week. Some of the models are printing out pressure down the 920 millibars, so a very, very intense area of low pressure. And it's features like that that can have significant impact on the pattern within the high latitudes, so i.e. the Arctic and the pole. But as we play through this loop, you can see here that we start to see the return of the Atlantic. Very, very foggy morning across many central and eastern portions of England. That is going to quickly get replaced by more fronts, one after another, moving in off the Atlantic. And you notice here that we are seeing a fairly pronounced area of high pressure over Scandinavia, but we're not seeing that any kind of cold air coming around this area of high pressure. We are seeing cold coming into Eastern Europe, but of course we've got a very strong jet stream coming in from the west, and that essentially will stop any cold from the east progressing towards the British Isles. But you can see the general idea what happens. What is interesting, however, is that area of low pressure that I alluded to, the remnants of Hurricane Nicole. What is going to start happening is we're going to start to tap colder air from Greenland, from Canada, and it's going to get transferred across the Atlantic, and that is where we're going to get into a cooler pattern as we go through the second half of the month here. So I think the overall idea is turning out not too bad. I've kind of said that the Mann-Gillian Oscillation, the tropical influence, we could see a colder second half of the month of November, and I think that is going to take place as we play through the loop here, watch the area of high pressure, Scandinavia, eastern portions of Europe. That is going to continue to transfer colder air from Russia westwards. But of course, you don't have that connection into the western portion of Europe here. But notice the amount of traffic, the amount of low pressure traffic that is essentially ganging up in the UK, and it is quite a messy picture actually as we go through the next week to 10 days. You can see here as we play through the loop, you can continue to see these areas of low pressure shifting further south as high pressure builds up into Scandinavia, links up with even Greenland. And what it's doing is it's not shutting down the Atlantic door, but what it's doing is it's forcing the jet stream and the development of low pressure further south over the Atlantic. And what we're going to start to see is we are going to see colder air getting pulled over the Atlantic and into the UK, and we could see the return of I'm saying return, but we've not really seen it anyway. But mountain snows across parts of particularly Scotland. But we could see some very significant deep areas of low pressure with this type of pattern. You only have to look at this chart here for Wednesday the 23rd, a 969 millibar low over the Bristol Channel. You can see here that the model is sniffing out snow for the higher elevations. You only have to look at the 850 temperatures and you can see here that we're involved in a lot colder air. We're starting to see colder air becoming more involved in the pattern. Even though it's an Atlantic driven pattern, we are starting to see colder air becoming a little bit more involved. It's getting closer, if you will. And you notice here that as we go through to the very end of the month, look at the depth of this area of low pressure. Look at the amount of cold air now in place as well. Nothing brutal or anything, but certainly it's more of a return to normality, if you will, rather than seeing stupidly warm temperatures, 19, 20 degrees like we're seeing at the moment. We're going to start to get an increase in active weather, but also colder air is going to become more involved. Look at this here, Wednesday the 23rd of November. We've got a very powerful area of high pressure at 941 millibars over eastern portions of Europe. We've got a deep area of low pressure that is exiting the UK. We've got a frontal system here associated with this 919 millibar area of low pressure. What that's going to do is going to pull very, very cold air out of the north around this centre, and of course, as it crosses warmer than normal Atlantic waters, it's going to lose a lot of its cold intensity. But nonetheless, it is going to start to transport colder air into the Atlantic pattern, and that is going to start to increase the potential of hill and mountain snow, I think, through to the end of the month here. But a very busy weather map, a very messy map, a very complicated pattern as well. We've got interesting things going on here. This is PV Forecast, a tweet here indicating the wave heights, to amplitudes, indicating that we're starting to see the potential for blocking within the upper levels of the atmosphere, so the upper troposphere and the stratosphere. We are seeing a weakening of the westerly winds, as you can see here. And this is something that we need to just keep a check on, if anything. Here we'll play through the 10 millibar temperature profile here, and there is no huge change, but we are seeing a slight stretching of the PV at stratospheric level through the second half of the month. But within the core of that polar vortex, we're talking about temperatures close to the mid minus 80s, so a very, very cold and colder than normal polar vortex. But you notice here the warming that we're seeing around this, this circulation, if you will. What we do see is that stretching, and it tries to kind of push down towards Canada here, as you notice here. As we play through the loop again, you can kind of see where it's getting stretched, and a part of that PV is trying to push down towards North America. That to me would almost keep the westerlies going over the Atlantic and over Europe, and therefore we would continue to see more of a more of a positive North Atlantic oscillation, I think, overall. So I think the majority of the cold within the mid latitude pattern is more focused over North America as we go through the remainder of November, possibly on into December. So that's just my opinion, that's my hunch based on what I'm seeing. And like I say, we just need to keep an eye on things. Interesting tweets here by our good friend Shryan Bruin, based in Dublin, Ireland. Always puts out fantastic stuff. I always appreciate Shryan's input and his knowledge of weather, actually. But he's kind of making mention of the fact that this month somewhat different to 2011, but something similar in terms of November 2011 versus November 2022. What's interesting about that particular month is we had the second warmest November on record for the British Isles. We had a very strong area of high pressure centered over Denmark and southern portions of Scandinavia. We had the Atlantic trough over the open Atlantic. We had southerly winds, which hence why we had the second warmest November on record. And it's quite interesting, actually. This is the month of November so far. We've had more Atlantic influence, as you can see here, the trough leaning into particularly the northern half of the British Isles. Remember, we had the wettest opening week to a November on record for the south of England here, the southeast of England. So that's quite interesting. But it's interesting, actually, if you notice here that the latest Met Office forecast here, if I can try and find the tweet, is indicating a firm positive over the UK and over the northwest of Europe here. This would be a warmer and drier than normal winter. And he goes on to say that it's something very similar to 2016, 2017. Interestingly enough, if you look at the CFSV2 for the month of December, we've got the ridge of high pressure almost centered bang slap over the British Isles here. So you notice here, this is for the month of December. According to the CFSV2 monthlies, we've got a strong ridge of high pressure over the UK, and that is very, very similar, if you notice, to what the model has for the December through February period over our region of the world. And that is the concern, that if we do get some ridging up into Alaska, like we're seeing now, almost off the scale strong warming within the mid to upper levels of the atmosphere over Alaska, we're seeing a dump of Arctic air into the center portion of the United States. The problem that we've got is we've got warmth over the Caribbean, cold air coming south. We're getting a strengthening of the jet stream over the Atlantic. And in December 2011, by the way, we had some incredibly strong storms that battered the UK. If my memory serves me correct, it was December 2011 that we've seen a wind gust on Cairngorm summit of 165 miles per hour, which wasn't a kick in the backside of the record, the UK record for wind speed. So we had a very warm November, and of course this November there is indications that we're starting to cool things down, but it has been a very, very warm opening 10 to 13 days of the month. Then if we do happen to have a strengthening of the jet stream later down the road, we could have something similar to 2011, which was a stormier month for the UK. And of course, winter 2011-12 wasn't a particularly cold. In fact, it wasn't a cold winter really at all. So, the fact that the cold is coming into the United States, we're seeing the strengthening the jet stream. We need perspective. I'm not writing off winter, but this is what I'm seeing here. And, we're getting cold in the eastern portions of Europe. Is this a sign of what's coming? I just simply don't know. But that is my thoughts on this Remembrance Day. Of course, we are thoughtful of folks in the past that have committed their life for our well-being today. Of course, the one good thing about all this is if we don't get a cold winter, it's not going to be a bad thing in terms of the energy bills. I suppose that's one thing to look at. But that's it for today. Thanks for watching. I do appreciate it. Please like, share, and subscribe. See you again next time. Bye for now.